If you've been exercising for a while or have exercised consistently for a while, you have definitely gotten to this point at one time or another. So today we are going to chat about how to know when your exercise routine is no longer serving you, how to know whether or not it just comes down to discipline or whether or not you need to switch it up. Welcome back to Wellness Exists, the pod. I'm your host, Dr. Kelsey Vick, a board-certified orthopedic doctor of physical therapy, a pelvic floor physical therapist, and the owner and founder of the Ella Wellness Sisterhood. And throughout the summer, we're doing some fun, sort of girly episodes. Next week, we have a super exciting episode with Dr. Felice Chan, who is a traditional Chinese medicine doctor and someone whose perspective is just entirely different than my own, and someone who I learned so much from during our interview. And I know that you guys will be able to tell as soon as light bulbs start to go off in my head during the interview. So I'm excited to share that one next week. We did a blog post with her in our June newsletter, in our magazine nostalgic newsletter that we put out every month. So if you are interested and want to get hyped for that episode, I will leave the link to that magazine style newsletter below. That way you can learn about her, learn about traditional Chinese medicine, some of the successes she's seen with her patients, how it helps her, and then also her traditional Chinese medicine toolkit for things like anxiety, acne, gut health, bloating, the menstrual cycle, all things that we'll also cover next week. So if you've listened to the pod for a while or know me at all in real life, you know that I am constantly switching up my exercise routine. The pillars stay the same, and we've chatted about some of those pillars before. I'll leave that link below too, but the pillars stay the same. But as far as the routine goes, I vary it a good amount. I've been exercising for a very long time consistently, and we cannot possibly expect ourselves, our bodies, our brains, our minds to tolerate the same exercise, that repetition over and over again. And so I have a few pillars that I like to think about when it comes to, is it time for me to switch up my exercise routine based on my mental state, based on my physical state? Is my body actually tolerating the routine of exercise that I'm doing? Or am I just lacking discipline and need a good slap on the butt to get back in action? So we'll talk through all of that today, but I am someone who definitely abides by the rule of a healthy amount of consistency, but then also mixed with a healthy amount of variety. And I feel like this concept can get actually confusing because when we say consistency and variety, those are almost two sides of the spectrum. But when I speak about consistency, I mean in regards to muscle growth and muscle activation and refining neuromuscular pathways. So we need that consistency in our strength training routines with some of the patterns that we do, some of the movement patterns that we do, some of the exercises that we do, in order to provide a sufficient amount of stimulus over a sufficient amount of time in order to see the changes that we want to see, whether that is hypertrophy, more of a toned look, aesthetic goals, different things like that. We do need consistency for. We also need consistency to run down and drive down those pathways that connect to our muscles. The more we use it, the less chance we have to lose it. And so the more we're driving down those pathways, the better we're able to recruit some of those fibers, especially when it comes to muscle activation. However, we also need to be able to vary things up slightly and drive down different pathways, different mind-muscle pathways, different neuromuscular connections, so that we're not losing the ability to activate when it comes to muscle, like those motor units or those muscle fibers. So we need to have that healthy amount of consistency to see the change that we want to see, but then also that variety to protect ourselves from injury, to drive down more pathways so that we're able to keep those pathways for longer as well, to get more efficient at some of the pathways that we might not drive down. And I look at it as a highway, but I use that metaphor to talk about mind-muscle connection. And the more that we drive down those pathways, the more that we utilize them, the better we are able to activate those pathways, and then also better speed of activation for those pathways as well. So let's chat. How do you know when your exercise routine is no longer serving you? I know when I get to this point, I always have to think, okay, is it time for me to switch it up? Maintaining some of those same pillars, because we do, of course, need cardiovascular fitness. We need strength. We need endurance. We need power. We need all of these things. We need speed. We need all of these components to be a healthy body, a healthy human moving through life. But the way we reach some of those pillars can differ and should differ throughout our exercise journey. So how do we know whether or not it's time to switch it up, or whether or not we're just being lazy and need a good, healthy, kick in the butt in order to get ourselves into gear? I think I said slap in the butt earlier. We'll keep it in there because that's definitely a Kelseyism. So in my head, I divide it into two categories as things to check in on in order to know whether or not it's time to switch up my routine. And those two categories are psychological and then also physical. So your mental state, but then also how your body is tolerating that exercise. So when we talk about psychological, are you constantly feeling down or having trouble staying motivated, getting over that initial barrier to entry with your exercises? Are you like, dang, I really have to exercise today. I really don't want to, consistently over time? And this is where knowing your menstrual cycle and knowing what phase you are in your cycle really helps, because in that luteal phase, we do often shift towards these more protective, less motivated pathways a little bit. So if you're noticing it in your luteal phase, maybe it's due to this hormonal shift within your body. But if you're noticing it consistently over a few cycles, that might be indicative that it is a more psychological barrier to entry that you might benefit from switching up that routine a little bit. The other thing to check is if you're feeling down in your follicular phase when you are about to start exercise, or that hill to overcome in order to actually start your exercise session that day is like higher and higher in your follicular phase, where we're typically more motivated, we're typically more willing to exercise, and we enjoy that exercise and we recover better in that follicular phase. So if you're having some of these down thoughts in the follicular phase, that might be another indication that maybe it is time to switch up your routine a little bit. When it comes to the physical category, this is whether or not your body and my body feels like it's still benefiting from the same routine we've been doing. So if your body isn't positively responding anymore, then it might be time to switch it up. And this is one of those, I feel like when I get the urge to switch it up, it's a combination of both psychological factors and then also physical factors. So for physical factors, I typically notice a little bit more like lethargy or fatigue after my workouts. I notice a little bit more just puffiness in my body after my strength training sessions. I notice that it's a lot harder for me to recover from some of my cardiovascular sessions, especially if I've been doing a ton of hill sprints over time. I just start to plateau a little bit in those improvements in my strength training sessions or my cardiovascular running sessions. And if you're feeling these symptoms throughout your cycle, again, that might be indicative of a needed change. But if you notice, hey, I am in my luteal phase, feeling a little bit more bloated, feeling a little bit more fatigued, my recovery is a little poorer, then that might be more of a hormonally driven response versus something that indicates that you might actually need to switch up your routine. So it's nice to have that awareness of where you are within your menstrual cycle, so that can help guide your decision on, am I lacking discipline? Is it hormonally driven? Or do I really need to switch up my routine? So for me, a lot of the time this manifests in, again, feeling puffier, poor recovery. I don't feel challenged as much in my workouts. I don't feel like I want to push myself as much during my workouts. I just feel a general plateau and a more difficult recovery after any of my exercise sessions, whether or not that was when I was more in a Pilates phase or when I was in a hill sprint phase, which again, I sprinkle those workouts throughout my routine nowadays, but sometimes that balance and that shift in what I prioritize is how I switch up my routine to help my body and my mind. So what should you do about it if you realize, okay, no, this is something that I need to switch it up. I am not enjoying working out anymore. I'm not enjoying exercise anymore, whether that's psychological reasons, physical reasons, or a combination of both. So my first recommendation I actually got from Dr. Shannon over at Evlo Fitness, and every 12 weeks or so, I believe, they program a reset week. So this is a full week off of your typical workouts. And you can sprinkle it in with vacation. It doesn't have to come at the end of the 12 weeks. You can time it with your schedule, but it's a nice sort of exhale throughout your training and your programming to reset and just realize I don't have to put the pressure on myself to work out in the way that I had been working out before. I can add in some walks. I can add in pickleball. I can do nothing. It's just this week to reset. And I think that's a really healthy way to approach things. I don't know if any of you guys have ever done any sort of artistic sport before. I was a gymnast, a cheerleader, and a lot of the times after I was sick, so almost a forced reset week throughout my training, I would immediately get a new skill after that break. So whether a lot of the times it came down to a tumbling skill or a skill on beam or bars, I would always get that skill immediately after a week of being sick or a forced reset. And there's something scientific about this where it does take your brain time to fine tune those pathways a little bit, where we need that little bit of a break. We need that variety in some way. So if you're feeling this way and you really do like your routine and you feel like it's still really good for you, maybe it's just time to take a week off and then start it back up after that week of a reset. These next ones might seem a little bit more obvious, but try a new style or a new breakdown. If you're used to 4 days of strength, 1 day of running, 1 day of Pilates, change up that balance a little bit, shift it. Or if you're like, okay, I'm sick of Pilates, let me try bars. Similar style, I guess, or similar goals sometimes with that form of movement, but a little bit different to where your body is challenged in a new way. You could also try more group fitness classes or friend workouts. I know a lot of the time when I'm struggling with motivation or discipline, really is what it comes down to, I'll oftentimes ask my husband or my sisters or my friends, hey, can you work out with me today? I'm struggling getting started, but I know that it's not because it's not right for my body or my mind. It's just my discipline and my motivation is struggling today. I mentioned this a little bit before, but maybe the balance isn't right. Maybe we need to add in more cardio days, more strength days, more stabilization days, or smaller muscle group days like Pilates, like the bar classes, like deep core work. So switching up the balance of your workouts might be a way to switch it up enough to help your body psychologically and physically. And then lastly, I do think knowledge helps. Understanding what your body is going through, how your body responds to different forms of exercise. Some of the time that helps me really stick with a certain routine, or helps me problem solve on what to add into my routine based on things that I might not have in my routine currently, like those smaller muscle groups. That's the one I'm really working on right now, is I feel like I have a good balance of strength and cardiovascular fitness work, but I don't necessarily have a dedicated day for some of those smaller muscle groups. So that's something in my own mind where I'm like, maybe I need to add that to switch it up just a little bit. So understanding what your body actually requires in order to do that exercise and how that exercise actually benefits your body and helps for life. And then lastly, if you think it might be related to discipline, if you're like, nope, doesn't apply throughout all of this, maybe it is related to discipline and motivation. Try a workout challenge with your friends. I just had a lot of my family in from out of town, and my cousin and her husband were mentioning they had a friend challenge where they set up the challenge for you get a point for each workout, and you have to get a minimum of 5 or 6 points a week. So 5 or 6 workouts. They were also tying it to alcohol consumption. So if you consumed alcohol, you had to do another workout, and that workout negated the alcohol. If you drank alcohol, you'd have to do a 2-a-day workout, but not that you get 2 points. It was just that the alcohol was -1 point and that second workout was +1 point. So that sort of negated each other. And I thought that was just a fun challenge. They were doing it with her sister-in-law and brother-in-law. And so something as simple as that, where it's a point system, and at the end of the 6 to 8 weeks, you get some sort of reward. It's okay to have that external or extrinsic motivation in order to help kickstart or get you back on some of those healthy routines that you are struggling with motivation for. This one's big for me, but setting it in my calendar. I love a checklist. I love checking things off the list. I love deleting things off my calendar. So putting it in my calendar and actually doing it and then checking it off is one of those things that helps me get motivated and stay a little bit more disciplined in my exercise routine. Accountability, like that friend challenge, or even just texting your friend like, hey, I'm struggling with discipline. I'm going to text you every time I work out, and I want you to do the same if they're struggling too. That way you guys can keep each other both accountable and have someone to report to make sure that you are maintaining some of those healthy routines. And then this last one, I remember all the time in school, people would tell us this when starting homework or even cleaning the house as kids. Set a timer for 5 minutes, see what you can get done. If you don't feel like it after, that's okay. At least you showed up for yourself. So thinking of exercise and movement like that, where set a timer, 5-10 minutes. And usually after that amount of time, you're like, I'm already, 25% of the way there, or whatever the percentage is, might as well finish it out. So just setting a timer, committing to a smaller amount of time, and then seeing what your body and your mind will give you after that. I know sometimes it is hard to figure out what is working and what is not. So I am a big signs girl and symptoms girl when it comes to this. So this is the checklist I go through to know whether or not I need to switch up my routine or whether or not it is related to discipline and motivation. And I just need a slap in the butt, kick in the butt to get myself into gear. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, keeping it fun, lighthearted, girly. Stay tuned for next week where we interview Dr. Felice Chan, a traditional Chinese medicine doctor. I'm so excited for you to hear her episode and just get to meet her virtually because she is such a calming presence. And I really feel like you guys will absolutely love her episode. So stay tuned for that next week. But I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. A comment, subscribe, review, all of that super duper helps. Let me know what else you guys want to Wellness Girl chat about throughout the summer. And I'll see you guys again on the next episode of Wellness Big Sis the Pod.